Welcome to Nobilis Erotica, the best science fiction and fantasy erotica anthology podcast in the known universe. This month, a furry, straight, midnight rendezvous ghost story. This is episode 489. I am Nobilis Reed. Our authors, P.M. Amaras and Paul Driggere, have been writing together for almost 30 years, mostly for clients and commissioned work. In 2018, they began working with webcomics and so far produced The Depths, Insignificant Otters, and Island Girls. They are always looking for extra support to keep the pages producing, and they use professional paid artists. Many of their erotic stories can be found in Wet Fur and White Fur, anthologies of erotica mixed with a variety of elements and revolving around the furry genre. Their first novel, Shadows in Light, is a combination of fantasy and mystery interlaced with erotica and horror, with many 5-star reviews from readers' favorites. Find them at scribesunlimited.com. This one is narrated by yours truly. Remember that you can get even more erotic audio if you join the Patreon campaign at patreon.com/nobilis. In addition, you will get access to the podcast Discord and my undying gratitude. Here we go. The Midnight Swim by P.M. Amaras and Paul Driggere. If you find yourself visiting down amongst the simple folk here in Delaware, Ohio, doubtless you've come across a tale or two about our small town from time to time. From the big Chanoa train wreck of '05 to the Windsor Tiger murders of '29, Old Wolf Geordie McCall's plunge off Carson Ravine in '57. Oh, I see it in your eyes already. That happened here, all right. Made all the headlines 'cause he was rich as pig shit on a hot summer day. I envied his missus, who ended up fighting in court over the inheritance for God knows how many years, with a host of other wolves, cats, and canines all claiming they were his wives, too. She eventually won, got the mansion, a 12-car garage, patio, swimming pool, and nearly 40 or so acres of zoysia grass that went with it. She's long since gone now, though, of cancer. The mansion's been sitting deathly silent for about a year now. Well, it was till Alana showed up, anyway. I lived next door to the McCalls, see? That's how I knew a lot about it. Name's Bob, by the way, Bob Reese. And yeah, I know that look. How the fuck does a 20-something gray wolf like me know so much about the past, right? I'm into history is all. I'm into it like some folks around here are into baseball or poker or cars. And yeah, I'm into those things too, I reckon. I got out from under my parents' wings at the ripe age of 16. Went to work as a waiter for a mob-infested hangout up in Cleveland for a few years, and suddenly I had more money than I knew what to do with. When I got back home here and where, hell, you don't need to hear this story. Suffice to say, I'm a pretty rich wolf, and I've been kind of feeling like the caretaker to the old McCall place since my return. I'm a game designer now, so I stay up plenty of nights on the computer. I can look out my bedroom window and see that dark monstrosity of a house glaring back at me. This also allows me to keep an eye out on the place and discourage looting or vandalism. Delaware isn't exactly noted for its most honorable, law-abiding citizenry. Anyway, one night I'm on the computer, doing some late-night coding and sipping Pepsi, when my cell phone vibrates in my shirt pocket. As a rule, when I'm on the computer, I've got headphones on, listening to music that's pretty loud and hard, so I don't normally hear the phone. Or anything else around me, for that matter. Yeah, I grumbled into the headset, tossing away the headphones. Bobby? A soft, elderly voice replied, and I recognized her as Ms. Ellie Bridges, one of the other neighbors. Ellie! Hey, babe! I was all charmed. Ellie's one of the good ones here in Delaware, a 70-something tigress who runs the local library, and she's one of the reasons I love history as much as I do. I grew to love her like the grandma I never got to know, and she always spun me a story or three when I dropped by to pick up a book or peruse some magazines. I glanced at the time. Midnight. What the fuck was she doing up? Bobby, be a dear and wander over yonder to the McCall place. I heard a commotion a few minutes ago. I don't want to call the police just yet, you know. Might just be kids. Well, what'd you hear? I said, getting up from my chair and going over to the window to look outside. I noticed a light blue glow shimmering and dancing in the moonlight, back behind the mansion. In the heat of early summer, the haze seemed to make it look electric and alive. Sounded like splashing. Maybe some kids got up over the gate somehow and had a swim? I flipped up the sash, ignoring her for a moment and training my keen ears toward the mansion. I did indeed hear a loud splash and then silence once more. Well, I heard it too that time, Ellie, I sighed and glanced around my large bedroom, seeking out a possible weapon I could use to look more formidable than my 5'8", barely 160-pound frame let on. I'll go off and chase him out. Ellie, y'all go back to sleep. I hung up, put the phone in my pocket, and walked over to my closet, fetching a baseball bat. It felt right in my paws, and I hurried downstairs and out the door into the humid night air. The mansion sat not 50 yards from me, so I was at the end of my sidewalk and running up the long driveway toward the large patio at the rear in about a minute. I opted for stealth. No point in going off half-kilter when I had no idea who, what, or how many others were in there. I tiptoed toward the large, surrounding iron gate separating the pool deck from the rest of the house, and noticed it was wide open. Someone must have really wanted in that pool. The gate's panels had been rusted shut and locked for months, and no key for the giant now unlocked padlock was present, to my recollection. I peeked inside and saw the edge of the pool. From up close like this, the water looked amazing. The underwater lights were obviously on, and the crystal blue surface practically sparkled, like millions of diamonds or pinpoint lights. It almost hurt to look directly at it. It looked that bright. I heard another softer splash and then several more following it, and I gripped the bat nice and tight as I walked up the patio, onto the concrete deck, and looked at the gorgeous sight in front of me. McCall's pool was their pride and joy at one time, about 30 feet long, 20 feet wide, and a good 18 feet deep at one end. Nothing much to it, except it was rectangular and had a diving board and a slide. The deck was spacious, with a few comfy plastic loungers and tables with large umbrellas, and a dining area with an awning close by. In the center of the pool, doing a lazy backstroke in circles, was a sea otter unlike any I'd ever seen before. She had long black hair that trailed and floated around her lithe, sleek form like a silky cloth. Her bristly fur was about as deep brown as could be, without heading towards black. She was nude. Her dark breasts and black nipples poked up out of the water, and as her rudder tail swirled about her tight ass, it tucked between her shapely legs briefly, hiding a shaved, bare pussy from view. The bat nearly dropped from my suddenly sweaty paws, and my mouth opened and closed a few times trying to get out words. I had an instant hard-on going in my jean shorts. The girl in the pool stopped swimming, and two remarkable green eyes opened and looked at me. Yes? She rolled over and treaded water. The surface barely was enough to hide the glistening cleavage. May I help you? I shook my head. No, what are you doing here? The sea otter smiled brightly. What does it look like? I'm swimming. I chuckled. Her soft voice had a lilt to it I liked immediately. Yeah, I can see that. I boldly walked up to the pool, the bat at my side. Y'all ain't really supposed to be here. My neighbor was set to call the cops. She pursed her lips and her short whiskers drooped somewhat, but that only made her look more sexy and I myself more horny. I'm sorry. I didn't know I was keeping people awake. Well, what are you doing here? I sat down on the edge of the pool and dipped my bare feet in. The water, God, it was so warm and felt so fucking good. I was thrilled to see the sea otter smile again and breaststroke towards me, stopping just next to me and hanging a small webbed paw on the pool's edge. I'm new here. I took over the McCall's place about a week ago, but I haven't had a chance to really settle in yet. She held onto the edge, and I noticed her tuck a gorgeous set of legs up to her. Around her foot she had a small silver anklet that practically glittered under the surface. I'm Alana Dufresne. And she offered her wet paw to me to shake. Bob. Her paw felt amazing as I took it. Bob Reese, I guess I'm your next-door neighbor? Alana grinned. I guess so. Come to welcome me to the neighborhood? She laughed softly and pushed away from the edge backwards, floating on her back and showing me her full, nude form again. I could feel the hard-on in my jeans trying to escape. I felt so hard. The thought of just one of those paws holding my cock would be enough of a fantasy for me to go home and jerk off to. I began to worry if she could see my enthusiasm as well as I could feel it, trying to burn a hole in my jeans. "Oh, no, I laughed and watched her practically perform in front of me like my own private water dancer. Them sea otters are pretty amazing. No doubt you know it, too. Fucking sirens of the sea, they are. Fucking wet goddesses. I should probably just let you get back to your swim." I was instantly 12 years old again, like I'd just been caught by Mom with a stiffy in one paw and one of my dad's play furs in the other. "I promise I won't stay in much longer," she smiled, and then did a backward somersault, liquid smooth and slow. I caught a sight of her breasts, then her trim tummy, her beautiful pussy, and then her legs and finally petite webbed feet and pointed toes as she completed the flip and came back up to look at me, wet hair straggling across her sculpted face and plump cheeks. Okay, now I had a lot of images tucked away for jerking off to later. "Oh, no, ma'am, you can just stay in the water long as you feel like. I ain't gonna keep you from enjoying yourself." I couldn't help it. I waited until she did another flip, and then I stroked the full bulge sitting in my shorts. I was totally surprised to feel wetness as my wolf cock let off pre-cum into my briefs. "Yes'm, you don't have to stop." Alana came back up to the surface after another dipping and looked up at me, nodding. "You want to join me, then?" Her eyes twinkled like little stars, and she tilted her head to the side, and her gaze never left my face. I thought about the work I was doing on a tight deadline for tomorrow, and that Ellie'd be mad as a hornet at me if she heard more noise, and would definitely call the cops. But then I was shrugging and unbuttoning my shirt and wading into the water by the steps at the shallow end and coming towards Alana in the deep part. "Feels nice," I said hoarsely, as though I hadn't spoken in years. Alana nodded and swam towards me, stopping a few feet from me until her toes could touch bottom. She couldn't have been more than 5'2" or so. "I love it so much, especially on a night like this," she said softly, breathing a bit fast from her repeated submersions. Something soft brushed against my legs, and I realized it was that thick tail of hers. Underwater, it felt just like another strand of luscious warm silk over my fur. "Oh, sorry about that. That tail's got a mind of its own sometimes." I laughed. "Oh, shoot, Alana, that's all right. Your tail's got to do something down there, right?" She joined my laughter and floated closer to me. I could feel the flames coming off her pussy and her breasts. I about wanted to rip off my shorts just to get my damn cock free and soak up some of this fetching creature's heat. She must have either read my mind or sensed the discomfort. "You can take those off if you want to," she said, clearly and confidently, as if she were asking me if I wanted a glass of lemonade. "No one's going to see but me." Then she added with a giggle, "Unless you don't want me to look." I didn't need much convincing. I'm not shy when it comes to females, never have been. 3 years working for a restaurant filled with booze, malls, and mobsters, you meet a lot of interesting people. I'd lost my virginity early on, and despite my average frame, I kind of make up for it with my soft gray fur, my deep blue eyes, and short brown hair. Yeah, I guess I'm a ladies' wolf of sorts. I don't mind you looking." I grinned and reached for the button on my jeans, unzipping my fly and pushing the denim down my hips. My cock stood out like a tent pole against my white briefs, and I was quite aware Alana was watching it intently. The very idea I was about to go skinny dipping with a perfect, beautiful stranger never registered. Alana suddenly giggled. "Here, let me help." Before I could stop her, she ducked down, grabbed a hold of my leg, and forced me under. I let out a bubbly protest and wiggled as the girl's paw clawed up my thigh, grabbed the hem of my briefs, and jerked hard. My full cock spilled out into the water like some crazed wild animal ready to fuck anything. I surfaced and caught my breath, coughing some and wiping my eyes, and realized Alana hadn't surfaced yet. Glancing around the large pool, I saw her dark form under the water, stroking slowly for the deep end, and then coming up for air at the far edge. She laughed and held up the briefs. "Well, look what I found, Bobby." I chuckled, shaking my head, and swam towards her. "Yep, you win the big prize, Otter." She stayed where she was, watching me come closer to her, until our nude bodies were hardly a foot apart. "What do I get?" she asked breathlessly, her green eyes positively shining. I couldn't stand it anymore, and I leaned my head forward, kissing her mouth. She let out a soft chirrup, and then kissed back, her tongue and mine joining from one mouth to another's, sharing our spit, making out like two lost souls in a magical pond. Briefly, we parted, both of us probably with our hearts pattering a mile a minute. There was an intense desire in me to fuck her, to push her up against the wall of the pool and rut her pussy royal, virgin or no. "You want me, Bobby?" she suddenly whispered, nuzzling my nose, as if she'd opened up a lid off my head and peeked into my lusty thoughts. I surely do, Alana." Her webbed paws were coming down under the surface, and I could feel those soft digits lighting on my cock, touching me, stroking me slowly. You want to fuck me?" If it were possible, her voice now seemed softer still, as if I were only hearing it in my mind. "You want to fuck my pussy, Bobby? Good and deep?" I was nodding and shaking my head at the same time. My vision was going screwy. I don't know if there was just water in my eyes or what, but everything just seemed to be different, like I was in a strange dream. "Fuck me," she said again, and the paws around my cock moved faster. Then she took a deep, deep breath and disappeared under the water in front of me. I felt her whiskers, then her mouth touching my cock, nosing it, nuzzling it, and then taking it inside her throat. Her paws hugged around my legs tightly. I cried out loud as I felt the most glorious wet heat surround my cock and pull hard. I struggled to keep afloat, treading water quickly, but when my paws instinctively grabbed onto her head to hold her on my cock, I lost the last of my buoyancy I could muster, and down I went. I felt my ears pop as the hungry sea otter swallowed my cock and kicked at the same time, pulling me down deeper and deeper, until I was sitting on the pool floor, 18 feet down, fighting to relax my lungs that were crying for air. Alana settled on the bottom in front of me, keeping my cock deep inside her mouth, making hard, bubbly gulping sounds I knew was her swallowing lots of pool water and my pre-cum together. I couldn't take any more and tried to push her head free of her, signaling my need for air frantically. She shook her head around my cock, letting a few bubbles escape her lips, and started tugging on it faster, bobbing her head wildly against my groin. I felt rockets going off in my head, and then a burst of cum suddenly shot from my cock, and then another and another. 10 or 12 jerks followed as I came hugely into Alana's mouth. I thought she'd let go of me, but she kept her lips fastened around me tight, practically sucking the cum right out of me until there was nothing left. I weakly tried to push off the bottom again, my air completely gone, and felt water go into my mouth. In my ecstasy from coming, I involuntarily coughed the water out and knew I'd take a breath soon and then realize it'd only be water. And then I'd get it into my lungs and cough it out, and then I'd do it again, and then I'd drown. Alana's arms wrapped around me, and then I felt her mouth against mine, kissing me hard. I hugged around her sleek form and kissed back, and felt a sudden warmth inside my mouth. It wasn't her tongue. To this day, I'm not quite sure what I felt. It wasn't air or nothing like that. It was just heat, like somebody'd put a small candle flame inside my mouth for an instant. All I know is when the sea otter pulled away from my mouth again, I didn't have to breathe anymore. I mean, I felt no pressure on my lungs, no screaming signals from my mind telling me to swim to the surface. Alana smiled at me and then sank down into my lap, wrapping her paws around my shoulders and kissing me hard and passionately. Before I knew it, I was rock hard again, my cock bobbing just under her ass. She let out this bubbly sigh I can't ever forget, and then she was wrapping her legs around me, gripping my ass with her feet and sinking down on my cock. I've never felt anything like it. Her pussy was so tight, so wet, so hot and silky smooth in there, it was like fucking hot butter. She bounced in my lap, and every so often a bubble or two would slip from her mouth, and her green eyes were so fucking intense, the stare would have set me on fire. We fucked each other wildly on the bottom, her staying on top of me, my paws supporting her ass. I'd never had underwater sex before, but I was in all my glory. When she bucked hard on my cock one more time, she let out such a watery shriek and closed her eyes tightly. I felt her pussy grind and then clench hard on my cock, and I watched in utter fascination as the sea otter came again over my cock, her body jerking and shaking atop of mine with each climax, bubbles flying from her mouth in a froth, her long floating hair entangling around her breasts and arms. She opened her eyes after one more slight tremble and chirred weakly at me, hugging around my body tightly one more time, looking deeply into my eyes before pushing off my cock and scissoring her legs for the surface. I watched her go up, trailing a few tendrils of cum between her legs, and then I suddenly needed air badly and pushed off the bottom following her. It seemed like a long time before I broke the surface and noticed first of all that there was this bright, awesome light shining into my eyes, blinding me. I yelped and shielded my stinging eyes, quickly stroking for the side of the pool and catching my breath. "Alana," I said, my eyes still closed. "What happened?" I slowly opened my eyes against a hard, unnatural glare and realized the sun was out, and just about the middle of a cloudless blue sky. I looked around the pool breathlessly, completely confused and disoriented. Of the sea otter, there was no sign. "Alana," I called out, and hurriedly waded to the shallows and stepped out, grabbing my jean shorts and shirt and running to the iron gate, which was closed. I looked dumbfounded down at the rusted closed padlock that had no key and the large twisted iron panels that were rusted shut. "Alana!" I gripped at the gate and pulled, but it didn't give way. "Alana!" I ran to the pool deck and tried around to the back side of the fence. Locked and rusted shut, just as it had always been. I remembered the cell phone in my shirt pocket and dialed for help, although I had no idea how I was going to explain what the hell I was doing on the property of a deserted mansion. By the time the cops saw fit to send someone out, Ellie had already heard my shouting and come over to keep me calm. I was shaking so bad and crying like a baby. "Shoot, boy, what the hell were you doing over there?" A feline officer asked me later as Ellie consoled me on my front porch. She explained, kindly I thought, how she'd heard noises last night coming from the McCall's place, and she'd sent me over to see what was up. "Well, why didn't you come back till now?" So I explained about Alana and finding her in the pool swimming and how she'd invited me to swim with her, and then somehow we must have fallen asleep on the deck and got separated. I left out the wild, unforgettable sex, still as fresh in my mind as a summer breeze. But while I was telling my story, Ellie's eyes, well, that old tigress's eyes started getting large as saucers. I didn't really notice it until the cop thanked me for my honesty, warned me to stay off the property, and left. "Bobby," Ellie said to me, her paw touching my shoulder, You're sure her name was Alana Dufresne?" I nodded. "That's what I heard, Ellie, clear as a bell." She bit her bottom lip, and tears started to well in her blue eyes. "I see. Bobby, tell me the whole story, son. Leave not a scrap out." So I told her, just as I'm telling you now, and then she sighed really deeply and said, "Alana's dead, Bobby. She died near 50 years ago. The McCalls had a pool warming party back in the summer of 1955. That's when they put it in, and, well, there was a lot of beer and a lot of virtuous women folk, you know how it is, Alana among them." I nodded, stunned at what she was saying. "We'd all gone back into the kitchen to have a snack, and when we got back outside, Alana was floating naked, face down in the pool. We don't know what happened. We thought maybe she'd just drowned, but there was blood in the water, too, still floating around her. She licked her lips, looking steadily into my eyes. "We kept it quiet. We couldn't let it get out that anything unnatural had happened upon her. The McCalls were the most powerful family in Ohio at the time, so we had someone take her. It was a drowning, nothing more, we said. She dove off the board, smacked her head on it, and lost consciousness, and just drowned. It made the most sense. We kept it out of the papers. She didn't have any family, and no one came looking for her. They burned her body in a crematorium. We left it at that." I was speechless. I think I just shook my head slowly for a while. She gripped my shoulder amazingly tight for an old tigress and continued her tale. "But old Geordie," she said, her voice breaking. Her mouth trembled as she looked grim as death. "He never got over her. Kept to himself for a long time, didn't speak much to his wife or kids. We saw him in town less and less. The folks that seen him, why, they said Geordie just didn't look right any more. He looked older and worn out. I don't rightly think he ever got a good night's sleep, Bobby. Kept talking about nightmares, waking up screaming in the middle of the night. Sweaty, shaking like a leaf." "Is that why he—" I swallowed hard, and I could feel my heart thundering in my chest. Ellie nodded, frowning. Yep, Bobby. I think he just gave up one night. Drove out to Carson's Ravine. You know the place, off I-76 and Stew's Junction. I'm sure I told you about it before at the library." She sighed deeply and glanced beside us at the old mansion. "I think he just couldn't live with Alana's death on his mind no more. No. I tried to dispel it all. No, she was here. I felt her, Ellie. She kissed me. We had sex, and I thought about how we'd somehow stayed underwater together, how we'd made love and we didn't need air, and how she'd just disappeared, and how night had turned into day, and how the gate was still locked. Ellie smiled and touched my paw. Maybe it'll be all right, Bobby. She suddenly frowned, and I saw something in her eyes I didn't like. It looked like mortal terror. Maybe she just wants to swim. That's all. She stepped off my front porch, and I watched her walk slowly, almost painfully down my driveway and towards her quaint brick house across the street. Every now and then, right about midnight, if we're still awake, Ellie and I will hear splashing going on. She'll call me, and I'll call her, and we'll talk about Alana, and how she's probably really enjoying herself, like she's still at the pool party in 1955, having the time of her young life. I'm tempted to go over again, just to see if the gate's open, if that padlock's undone, and if she's there, and still the same naked, watery godless backstroking leisurely in the blue like she hasn't a care in the world. I jerk off pretty much every night now, listening to the sounds of the water and thinking of our one night together. Part of me really desires to go back and have amazing underwater sex with her again. Ellie says I shouldn't, though. She's scared, I can tell. There's a lot of things I still don't understand about ghosts, she says. They can be very unpredictable in their actions. Maybe she just doesn't want me to end up face down and drowned in the pool, or with my body broken and crumbled at the bottom of Carson's ravine. It's been a few months now, and I seem to be getting pretty used to the splashing. The night sounds go on from midnight to about 1:30 a.m. or so, and then they stop altogether. Usually I'm a sticky mess by then, with my spent wet cock in my paw, and I'm gasping for air like I've been holding my breath a long time. I'm able to sleep most nights. Ellie, though, she's not looking so good. I pass by her in the library time to time, and she still smiles at me, but different somehow. She looks tired, worn, totally exhausted, and she seems older somehow. Oh, I forgot to mention. We've got this family stopping over next week to look over the mansion. I think they're interested in the Rich McCall history, and though they may just look at me like I'm crazy, I am considering the possibility of informing them of the otherworldly being occupying their swimming pool at night. But I don't know if I should. It's not just that they wouldn't believe me, but what if they did and tried to do something about it? I just don't know. Alana really loves that pool. And Ellie and me are both plenty worried she's going to find a way to keep it all to herself. And that's our story. If you'd like to get an ad-free version of this podcast, head to patreon.com/nobilis. As a supporter, you will have access to a personal RSS feed that you can drop into your podcatcher. And if you want bonus content every month, bump up your support to $3 a month. Currently, patrons at the $3 level are enjoying some brand new short stories from me. Remember to pick up Monster Whisperer Second Class in your favorite ebook retailer or on the Riverdale Avenue Books website, or pick up the audiobook on Audible, Amazon, or Apple. Your support helps ensure this series continues. You have been listening to the Nobilis Erotica podcast. Theme music is composed and performed by Mass Relay. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Until next time, listen hard.